All right, let's dive in. Today, we're decoding ISO 42001. Now, this is a big one. It's the world's very first international standard for managing artificial intelligence. AI is moving at lightning speed, and this framework is all about bringing some much-needed structure and responsibility to the table. So let's see what it's really all about.
So this really is the big question, isn't it? It's what organizations all over the world are trying to figure out right now. AI is getting baked into everything, from our healthcare to our finances, and we urgently need a structured way to govern it. I mean, we're talking about some really tricky stuff here, like algorithmic bias, decisions made inside a black box we can't see, and systems that literally change their own behavior over time.
Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. We'll kick things off with the unique challenges that AI brings. Then, we'll introduce the standard as a way to build trust. After that, we'll break down its core structure, peek inside the practical toolbox it provides, and wrap up with why this whole thing is so important.
So, first things first, let's talk about the core problem this standard is trying to solve. See, AI isn't just your run-of-the-mill software. It's a massive driver for innovation, for sure, but it also introduces a whole new class of challenges that our traditional IT playbooks just weren't designed to handle.
Yeah, this slide is perfect because it gets right to the heart of it. We're dealing with systems that make automatic decisions, but we can't always see why. That's the transparency issue. These systems are often designed by the data we feed them, not by logic a human wrote line by line. And here's the kicker. Some of them keep learning and evolving after they've been deployed. So the big question is, how do you govern all of that without killing the innovation that makes AI so powerful in the first place? So, with all those challenges, what's the solution? Well, enter ISO 42001. This is the world's first formal international answer. It provides the requirements and the guidance for setting up, implementing, and constantly improving what's called an AI management system, or AIMS for short. An AI management system, or AIMS, is really the engine of this standard. The best way to think about it is as a strategic blueprint. It's not just some technical checklist you tick off. It's the formal structure your organization uses to set its policies on AI, define its goals, and then build the actual processes to make sure you achieve those goals responsibly. And what's really crucial here is just how broad the standard's reach is. It's designed to be completely universal. It doesn't matter if you're a tiny startup building a new AI app or a huge multinational that uses AI across all its services. The whole point is that this framework can be tailored to fit your specific situation. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this thing is actually built. ISO 42001 uses a tried-and-true framework that many of you will probably recognize, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. And what that does is it turns the AI management system into a living, breathing process, not just some static project you do once and forget about. So the standard has 10 main sections or clauses, and clauses 4 through 10, they map perfectly onto this 4-stage cycle. It's a really logical flow that guides you through planning the system, actually doing it, checking to see how it's working, and then acting to make it better. First up is the plan phase, and this is all about building a solid foundation. It kicks off with Clause 4, where you figure out your organization's unique context. What are the internal and external factors that matter for you and your AI? Then, Clause 5 makes sure leadership is on board and sets a clear AI policy, which, let's be honest, is absolutely vital. Clause 6 is where you get strategic, planning for risks and setting clear goals. And finally, Clause 7 is about making sure you have the support, the right people, resources, and communication to make it all happen. Now, a huge piece of that planning phase is something called the AI System Impact Assessment. And this is absolutely critical. We're not just talking about business risk here. The standard demands a formal process to really think through how your AI system could impact individuals, different groups, and even society as a whole before you roll it out. Okay, so once you've got your plan, it's time for the do phase. This is all covered in Clause 8, Operation. And this is really where the rubber meets the road. It's about taking all those plans and controls you designed and actually putting them into practice, managing the day-to-day operations of your AI systems according to the framework you built. All right, after do comes check, which is Clause 9. So, you've implemented your system, but how do you know if it's actually working? This is how. This clause requires you to monitor and measure your performance, run internal audits to make sure you're sticking to the standard, and have your top leaders regularly review how the whole system is doing. And that brings us to the final piece of the cycle, the act phase, all detailed in Clause 10. This is all about learning and getting better. You take what you found out during the check phase and use it to improve. It forces a process for continual improvement and makes sure that if you find something wrong, you have a plan to fix it.
So, that's the high-level framework, the big picture. But what about the specific, practical actions you need to take? Well, that's where the standards annexes come in. Honestly, the best way to think of them is as the toolbox you use to actually build and maintain your AI management system.
We've got 4 of them. Now, Annexes A and B are what's called normative, which is just a fancy way of saying they are mandatory requirements. Annex A gives you a list of controls, and Annex B tells you how to implement them. Then you have Annexes C and D, which are informative. Think of them as helpful guidebooks filled with extra advice.
Right, and this relationship between Annex A and Annex B is probably the most important thing to understand here. It's really simple. Annex A is the what. It gives you a menu of controls, the things you could do. Annex B is the how. For every one of those controls in A, it gives you detailed guidance on how to actually put it into practice effectively. One tells you what to do, the other tells you how to do it. Let's make this real with a quick example. So you look at Annex A and it gives you the what. Control A.5.2 says you need to establish a process to assess an AI system's potential consequences. Okay, great, but how? That's when you flip to Annex B. It gives you that practical guidance, suggesting you should think about things like, does this system affect a person's legal rights, their physical or mental well-being? What about universal human rights? It connects the what to the how. Right, and those other 2 annexes, C and D, they're more like helpful companions. Annex C gives you some really useful lists of potential goals for your AI, like fairness or transparency, and it points out common sources of risk to watch out for. And Annex D is super practical. It explains how you can weave this AI management system in with other big standards you might already be using, like ISO 9001 for quality management or ISO 27001 for information security. Okay, we've gone through all the clauses, all the annexes. Let's pull it all together. After all that detail, why does a formal standard like ISO 42001 actually matter in the real world? What's the bottom line?
When you really boil it down, this standard is about delivering real-world value. First, it's a huge trust builder. It gives you a clear, auditable way to prove to your customers, your partners, and to regulators that you're managing AI responsibly. Second, it gives you a solid, structured process to get a handle on those unique AI risks. Third, by creating clear guardrails, it actually enables innovation, giving your teams a safe space to build and deploy new things. And finally, it drives accountability by making it crystal clear who is responsible for what.
Look, there's no doubt that ISO 42001 is a landmark step for governing AI. It provides a much-needed how-to guide for responsible management. But as these AI systems get more and more powerful, more and more autonomous, it leaves us and you with a pretty big question to think about. Will management standards like this, on their own, really be enough to steer us toward a future where AI is used ethically and for the good of everyone?